And welcome everyone. We have a special tonight. Joining me this evening, on the top right of your screen, is a regular of ours, Ewan, the one for whom we all stand, and immediately underneath him we have a special guest tonight, because this is not your normal Friday night traveller stream for us. We are taking what you might call a mid-season break for one episode. And we're doing a sort of double episode thing. Later on this evening, at our normal kind of start time, we're going to do a recap of the first half of season 2. Which is the first time we've ever done one of this, because the last time we did a recap, we didn't know we were doing seasons. So it was just a recap of the story so far. But this time, we actually know we're doing seasons. So we're doing half a season's recap. So if you're interested in what we've been doing basically for the last 6 months, which is about how long it takes our party to do one planet, round about 6 months per planet.
If we're lucky.
If we really hustle. Then that's what we're doing later. But before then, I have the genuine pleasure to introduce to everyone Timothy Collinson. Good evening, Timothy. How are you?
Hi there. Yes, all right, thank you.
Oh, and we have an interloper as well. Hello, Luke.
He snuck in late.
Ahoy, hoy. And I might be vanishing again as my eldest is just out the bath and is causing chaos.
Well, that's what eldest are for.
Absolutely.
So, Timothy, first of all, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Really, really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. It's a great privilege. I've been watching you as little pictures in the corner of my screen as I've tried to keep up with the story so far. Although I think I'm a little bit behind, but it's nice to see you in real, as it were.
Well, we were just talking about how we got into Traveller. And I know how the other two boys from the Baltic Star got into it, because I kind of introduced them to it. I'm guilty of that. And I got into Traveller, I think, somewhere around 1981-ish. But you go back even further than that, don't you?
Scarily, yes. I think I would normally say I'm not 100% sure, but I think I first came across it in 1979 when I discovered what I do remember, and it's still in the attic, is the Deluxe Traveller box set. It may have been in Virgin Megastore in Oxford Street, something like that, because I can't imagine I found it anywhere locally. It's possible it might have been in Forbidden Planet down the end of Oxford Street, Tottenham Court Road, but I suspect it was in the Virgin shop. And I just fell in love. I knew nothing about it when I first saw it, but I fell in love with the black box, but also the idea that you could, within 8 characters, have this fully formed planet. Yeah, okay, there was a bit of work to do, but just something about being able to roll the dice and have the 6 digits and, you know, your starport and your tech level, and have a planet, and your imagination was just inspired by that. Well, my imagination was inspired by it, and ever since then, the rest is history. Well, you can see a lot of it behind me.
Yes, I was going to mention.
I just fell in love with Traveller, and I think I'm a wannabe Slarty Bartfast. I just want a blank world map and a coloured pencil or two, and I just want to draw coastlines. And I kind of wish that you could still publish stuff like that. Unfortunately, it's all got to be much smarter now and much nicer looking. But there's a little bit of me that would very happily just publish little hand-drawn world maps, because that's kind of what I really enjoy doing.
Cartography is a thing. It becomes almost like a fetish if you enjoy it enough, doesn't it?
Yeah. But yeah, 1979 Deluxe Traveller, that was my kind of introduction to it. I went along with Mega Traveller. TNE just didn't grab me with the darkness and the kind of the change in the rule set as well. I didn't particularly want to kind of learn new rules. Then I was probably out of the reach of buying new stuff for a little bit. Eventually, now I saw T4. I may have missed things like Hero and T20 and had to sort of catch up with those later. And then, of course, I've been back for several, the last decade or two since, because I basically started writing I started making a list for I've never refereed a game until well into those years. I certainly wasn't kind of refereeing from the get-go. And I didn't think I could do it. So I was hoping that I had this really good friend, and I was hoping I could persuade him to referee Game of Traveller. So to make that easy for him, I started this list of the books I had that I could lend him so that he could run a game. And that list is what eventually became the Traveller bibliography. And has sort of slightly got out of hand since then in terms of size and bulk. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's not something you want to drop on your feet anymore.
Well, I was going to mention that pretty much everything we can see in your camera shot that isn't you, that isn't actually Timothy, is Traveller books and materials.
Worryingly, yes, and there's more in the attic, I'm afraid, where I can't keep it all on the shelves here. But yes, I used to say that I thought I had the biggest collection this side of the Atlantic. But when Mark emailed me to say, did I have this particular thing that he was missing, and I did, and could scan it and send it, then I think, well, maybe it's outgrown even that. But I don't know, to be honest. I'm sure Mark has huge collections and filing cabinets full of all sorts of stuff.
Well, he may well. I mean, I suspect what he's probably missing is the things that he didn't think to keep because everybody had them. And
yes.
Of course, they've now become rare because they've ended up being thrown away or lost over time. But he's probably got lots of absolutely unique things that nobody else has got.
Absolutely. I suspect that is exactly the case. I've just been very privileged to have sort of been there from early enough to have kind of done it the hard way, if you see what I mean. And I'm a librarian by profession, so there's a little bit of me that won't let go. So even TNE, when I didn't like it, I didn't let go of it.
It still forms a part of the collection.
Yes, it's still probably, I don't know, you can probably see it. I don't know where to point. I can't see it in the little tiny picture, but yeah, it'll be there behind me. And I must admit, there's bits of even TNE that I really like now. There's some real treasures in there that, just inspire you and kind of grab your imagination and things. So there's a part of me that would say there's no part of Traveller from which I don't take some kind of joy, inspiration, and just the fun of it, really.
Yeah. It's tremendous, actually, to have a game with this kind of heritage. One of the things that I have ended up doing running our campaign is dipping into scenarios that were written in the early 80s and gleefully changing bits that I needed to change, but essentially stealing inspiration from all sorts of things.
Absolutely, yes, yeah.
Did you get into the sort of the spin-off things, the Ajanti and those kind of things as well?
Yes, those boxes are up in the attic because they don't fit on the shelves essentially. But yes, they're all there somewhere. I don't know if I dare say this, but I challenge you to think of something Traveller-ish that I don't have. 2300's there as well, but yeah, give it a go if you like. I think you may not be able to see, but right at the very top there, a little pile of Japanese collections, box sets up there, which I'm very proud of, but are really difficult to locate and get hold of. And even if am I allowed to walk away and grab something myself? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. One of my special treasures, because why this is a particular treasure, Morgan Hernan is a Swedish fanzine from the 80s.
Right.
And this is its Traveller theme number. So there's only 5 of these, I think. It goes from 1 to 6, but 5 and 6 were combined. And number 4 was a theme issue for Traveller. And I didn't find this on the net. I found this in a bargain bin for like £1 in Gothenburg when I was visiting Sweden once. So it's a real treasure for me. The only sadness is I've never seen any of the other issues. So if you've got any viewers that know the other issues, that would be something I'd love to see. But I regard that as probably one of the rarest things I have. I can't imagine there's probably many copies of that floating around.
No, I mean, my own collection of original Traveller materials is very modest. The only thing I can say I sort of learnt from it is that the American core rule books were published in a slightly different aspect ratio to the British ones.
Yes. Yeah, so, I don't know if you can see on the top shelf, there's the books and the supplements. Yeah, they're different heights depending on whether they're GDW or Games Workshop, which is, for a librarian, really frustrating. Then I have to ask the question, do I want to try and collect both examples? And I've decided not, but there's a bit of me that wants to.
Yeah, the one thing I would say is I only have one in the taller set, which was when Scout came out, which was book 6 came out.
That was one of my favourites because, of course, doing the world building, then being able to do a system as well. And I spent way too many hours developing systems that, to be honest, I had absolutely no use for, because 99% of adventures I've ever created don't usually require an entire system with all the rock balls.
No. I mean, you'd need to be building almost a campaign in a system to really need all that.
Absolutely, yeah. But I still love doing it. It didn't stop me creating.
Well, it is one of the things about RPGs, not just Traveller, though I think Traveller's a good example of it. It does spur the imagination quite well. It gives you a sandbox in which you can play and build your own sandcastles in. It's lovely.
Absolutely, yes. No, I've really enjoyed that. And in kind of latter days in creating adventures, I've really loved the little avenues it takes me off down. Last weekend I was at North Star up in Sheffield. Oh, I've discovered Sheffield's a long way away, 7 hours on the train both ways. It's, for not Traveller, but for a science fiction role-playing game. So I have a confession. I have now, after, 40-something years, since 79, played a role-playing game that's not Traveller. Last week I played Alien, I played Star Trek FASA rules, Star Trek, was it Forged in the Dark rules, which I struggle with a bit, but I think that was what they were playing. And so I've actually played role-playing games that aren't Traveller, which is a bit of a shock to my system. I was having to roll under numbers and doing all sorts of fancy things with stress.
It's weird that there are systems out there that need you to do like subtraction rather than adding.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it was a weird world. No, we had a really great time. It was a good weekend. But the adventure I wrote for that, called Spindrift, took me into all sorts of stuff about oceanography and cephalopods and just all this kind of stuff, Octopus Ink and things, all this stuff that I knew nothing about, but with the benefit of Google and so on, you can learn a little bit about. And I just love all those little avenues that, adventures you might be writing or background you might be writing take you off into doing all sorts of things. Yeah, I sometimes worry, though, what the powers that be, looking at my search history, might think.
Oh yes, yeah. It would be.
I don't suppose the FBI care, but you do wonder sometimes.
I do have the same idle thought cross my mind sometimes, that it's not something I'd want to have to explain in a trial. The things I've looked up, not necessarily good things to be.
Why did I need to know about spear guns and how likely they are to kill you underwater?
Yeah. It is a worry for some people. Yes,
absolutely.
Yes. I'm afraid our party did have a little encounter with some cephalopods before we streamed. With a group of things we termed squidlings.
Ah, okay.
Which is a very cute name for something that actually turned out to be quite angry.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say these were intelligent cephalopods last weekend, but the heroes saved it. I actually managed to run it twice because someone had to drop out for COVID, so I stepped in to run the thing not once but twice, which was fun. Because one group knew Traveller, but the first group I had didn't know Traveller at all. So I then had to think, how do I compress 40 years of all of this in my head into no more than half an hour, which I thought was all I could reasonably take, explaining kind of rules setting and so on. And they were very patient, and I was very impressed with how well they got on with it and seemed to enjoy it, given that we were supposed to finish at midnight and went on till past because they wanted to wrap it up nicely, I took that as a vote of confidence, even though I was a bit cross with myself for keeping them up an extra half hour.
No, I think it's always nice to feel that you've had a resolution at the end of a story, but it's even nicer to feel that everyone was really quite keen on it going on a bit longer.
Yes, because at 5.2 I figured I could wrap it up, but it wouldn't have been so, I think, emotionally satisfying for them. With another half hour, it let them wrap it up, which for me was much better. Yeah.
And we do, in fact, have one of the aforementioned heroes in chat over on Twitch. I'm not sure whether they were the earlier or the later group, but they have come back for more, it would seem.
Oh gosh, is there someone there? Who's there then?
The only Dr. Moose was at North Star and played in your game.
Who was it? Sorry.
The only Dr. Moose is their Twitch.
Oh, Dr. Moose, yes. Dr. Moose was in the latter game. Dr. Moose was fascinatingly brilliant as, I'm trying to think, he was playing Gvudzon, which you may know from the Traveller Adventure. Being a very idle referee, having written the entire adventure, I didn't create a whole new set of PCs for them to play. I just thought, I've been running the Traveller Adventure for about 6 years and 40 sessions, and we finally finished in March after 6 years of it. So I kind of have got these characters in my head, and I just took them along and thought that's just the simpler thing to do, to be honest. So we had the March Harrier, which is the kind of main ship in the Traveller Adventure, and we had, we did have, I took all of the PCs that are given to you in the Traveller Adventure, but some of them aren't really much fun. And in fact, the least fun, we kind of killed off very early. And replaced that particular, I think he was a military guy, with this explosive archaeologist. Long story, but she was lovely. And both games, someone picked the explosive archaeologist, but Dr. Moose picked Gvudzon, who's always a favourite of mine, wearing his fancy waistcoats and his flash capes. And to be honest, not having much of a role on the ship because he doesn't have any skills. He's an emissary. He does have diplomacy, and I thought Dr. Moose did a really lovely job of replicating Gvudzon very nicely, and we had some floofiness stolen straight from yourselves.
Really?
I think it was in the first game. The nice German lady who was playing Gvudzon got in a water tank to practice diving, and came out looking very bedraggled, and then kind of went and cleaned herself up, and we decided she was very floofy, and that was. Yeah, that was straight out of yourselves and your lovely Varga general, isn't he?
yes, Agnar, a true love of all of our lives.
Absolutely. So I'm afraid, you say stealing shamelessly from places. I've stolen from the best there, and we had some floofiness.
Well,
and
actually, I was going to ask how you got into writing and publishing scenarios and adventures.
That's a good question. Oh, gosh. Only I'd have warning of that question.
if it's too complicated, it's fine. I have other questions.
I think I discovered about 20 issues in Freelance Traveller. Now, if you've not come across Freelance Traveller, you really ought to, because it's a wonderful free resource that Jeff Zeitlin over in the States puts together now every other month, not every month. And it might be 60 odd pages, plus or minus. He does a really stunning job of putting together a huge number of sort of words of Traveller. And I think I don't know why it took me so long to find, but it was about 20 issues in when I kind of discovered it. And I think I sent him something kind of out of, not very much hope of getting published. And he was very kind and published things. And I've published things with him since. And I started beginning to be able to sort of think, oh, well, maybe I could write something here and do that kind of thing. But the very first thing I wrote was actually for the old online Journal of the Traveller's Aid Society from Steve Jackson Games.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've had a look at the adventure called Ashfall, which now has a couple of sequels as well.
Yes, I have.
Sorry, this is really going to sound like advertising at some point, so do kick me if it's too much. But I sent the very, very first version of Ashfall to Steve Jackson's Games Journal of the Traveller's Aid Society, which is sadly defunct now. And they kindly published that, but it was years and years before I actually got to play it and took it to TravCon, which happens here in the UK, until COVID, every March. We've missed a couple of years now, which is why I went to North Star last week. So starved of a bit of Traveller, real people around a real table rather than little black rectangles in the monitor. And so I went to North Star as a kind of a get into Traveller. We're promised that TravCon will be back next year, possibly in March. So do look out for that because it's great fun down in Cambridgeshire, if that helps anyone. So hoping to see yourselves there.
That would be lovely, yeah.
So I eventually took Ashfall there, but what kind of really got me into kind of writing for it was going to TravCon for 3 years And I sat there by the third year. I'm sitting there looking around the table in the umpteenth, because, there's how many games, 4 or 5 games in the weekend kind of thing. And I'm thinking, looking at the referees, having initially thought I couldn't possibly do that, and thinking, I could do this. So the following year, I thought, okay, I sat on the train back to London, coming down to Portsmouth area where I live, with a friend there. And we had a chat, and I said, I've got this kind of idea. Now, this idea had been in the back of my head since I lived in Nigeria for a year at the age of 18, on the sort of year out before I went off to do a degree. And I kind of splurged in the hour down to London this idea for an adventure to this poor traveller friend who sat there kind of nodding and trying to, kind of avoid the looks of other people in the carriage, thinking, what on earth is he talking about? As I splurged this idea to them. And I said, would that, after an hour of that, I said, would that sound like an interesting game? And to their credit, they said, oh, yeah, I'd play that. So I then did nothing for 11 months. No. Next day, I sat and wrote 7,000 words of plot, just splurging it out of my head, and then did nothing for 11 months, as you do. And 11 months later, with a month to go, I'm thinking, oh, heck, I'm going to have to do something about this if I'm going to play this game. So I, for a month, as well as my full-time job, did nothing else but just write this stuff and create bits of world and create characters and create this. And I also had this idea for a lost colony. So I wanted the players to find a diary.
Okay.
And I thought, maybe my daughter, who was, I can't think how old at the time, but kind of that age, sort of diary writing teenager, basically. I said, maybe she would like to write it. So I gave her a little 1.5-page treatment of what I needed. And she came back with, I don't know how many words, sort of 60 pages of handwritten stuff. Unfortunately, she did it the night before my deadline for getting this printed was. So I had to type 20,000 words or something overnight. I've never typed so fast. And I'm kind of crying with what she's written about what I'd done to these poor people. So she'd done a really good job on that. And I printed all the stuff out as handout and so on, but also printed this diary as a little booklet. And from the moment I gave that diary to the players, it was never out of someone's hand as they tried to absorb this kind of thing. So for me, that was kind of real recognition that mostly my daughter had done a really good job there. But the entire adventure, we got to the end of it, and one of the players said, I've never played anything as Traveller as that.
Okay.
And it was the reaction that I got, such that the next day when I was running it a second time, the sign-up sheets went up on the wall, as they do in the little motel we stay in, and the slots filled within 30 seconds. All 6 slots got filled within 30 seconds. And that reaction then made me think, maybe I can do this. Yeah. And if you want to know, that adventure is what is now, I was touting it under the title of not Signs and Portents, which then was the Mongoose sort of in-house journal, but I called it Portents and Signs because of the story fitting that. Yeah. But Mongoose, when they published it, chose to change the name to Into the Unknown, which I have to say is a bit duller, perhaps, but anyway. So if you want to see that adventure, it's I think still available as a PDF from them. But that encouragement from the reaction of the players at TravCon was what made me think I can do this. And as I said before, the rest is kind of history. Although the next time, I sat down the next day thinking, if I'm going to do something for next year, I'm not going to leave it till the last month. So I spent the entire year writing, I think it was what became Second Science Society, with the nobles and so on. But I spent basically 11 or 12 months writing that. And then I got to the end of that, played that, and it seemed to go okay. And I thought, no, I'm never doing that again either, which is why the third year I went with Ashfall, because I'd written it. It was there. I thought, right, I'll just a few words. I know what I'm doing now. I thought, I'm just going to take that. It'll require no work whatsoever. Well, that wasn't true. But that kind of has led me on to subsequently, I've actually tried games with zero prep. Just let's play, let's create characters, see what happens kind of thing. So sort of my confidence grew really through the wonderful folk at TravCon. There's 35, 40 people, organised by Andy Lilly. Definitely recommend it if you're in the Cambridge area when it happens next. But the folk there have just always been really kind of warm, welcoming, and just so encouraging to new folk. I took a work colleague 3-4 years ago for the first time. She'd never played Traveller before. She went the first year, and she was much braver than I. Second year she went back, I can run an adventure. And again, folk were really encouraging, and she ran Signal GK. She took a classic adventure.
Yes.
Thought, yeah, rather than write one, much more sensible. Rather than write one, let's take something that's kind of already done, kind of thing. So yeah, that then sort of became. I did try sending things like Second Science Society and Ashfall and its sequels to Mongoose, and for whatever reason that didn't sort of suit them at the time. I think they weren't publishing things. I just caught them at a bad moment, I think, in their defence, when they were kind of between editions and they weren't really looking for material. So at that point, I was kind of thinking, I can't bear to sit on this. I think there's some value in it. Let's go through the TAS license route on drive-through. So there's a bit of me that would love to have a physical printed book. Obviously, I'd love to do that, and the TAS license doesn't allow that. But I'd rather the kind of material was there for people to read, people to enjoy, and I guess that's kind of what happened. And Mark Miller was very happy for me when I came up with the idea, because I was kind of doing stuff that was very rooted in the Spinwood Marches. And I had a long time love. That's a whole nother story about how I got into the Traveller adventure, which I can tell you if you like. But I was kind of rooted in that. I thought, let's call it March Harrier Publishing, and checked with Mark Miller. He was very happy with that. So that's how that came about, really.
That's fantastic. And on the subject of your published work, I think this is probably the right moment to offer you a word of thanks and a deep and profound apology, because first of all, I would like to thank you very much for sending me your the adventure set that we've actually got displayed on screen at the moment. There May Be Troubles Ahead, which is about 8 or 9 scenarios in a single publication. And I used one of them as one of the story threads for the recent adventure on Dillabrew. So thank you very much for letting us do that.
No problem. It's how I came to know you, because I think Luke or Ewan tweeted about it, and I thought, I'm going to have to watch now to see that happening. And I have to say that it's not a huge part of all that you do, but when you do those bits, I think, I wrote that. That's my character. That's my little scene. And I have to say, thank you to you guys, because it's just been magic, because I've never seen that before. I think I know one person has run one adventure at TravCon. My work colleague actually ran one of my adventures at TravCon once, and I was tempted to play it, but I thought that might be a bit mean to her to be seeing him playing that. So I didn't, but it was kind of a bit of a sadness to me that I kind of. So I did pop in to see how they were getting on at one point, take photos and so on. But you guys really are the first time I've kind of seen that happening with something I've done, which has been very magical for me. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Well, I'm pleased you see it that way, because I was very geared up to apologise for all of the twists and changes and the resetting of the location and the fact that
it's not what I wrote at all. I mean, no, I can see some remnants, some ashes, You'd lit the touch paper and No. The whole of that book actually came out of. I said I hadn't played very much from sort of 1979. The few experiences I had were, in a sense, were essentially playing myself and a referee. So the friend that I had, we sat on the top of a double-decker bus going from Sutton to central London once for kind of an hour and a quarter, and we went on a trip to Centre Parks with a kind of little group of us, and we played in the car on the way. Was kind of almost all of my experience of actually getting to play a Traveller adventure. But that kind of one referee, one player was much more my experience. And I couldn't think of any Traveller adventure that had been published that did that, except possibly Marooned, the old
Oh, yes.
GDW adventure Marooned
Yeah.
kind of does that, possibly, if you want to play it like that, one referee, one adventure. But that's kind of about it. So when I had this kind of idea of these little stories that I thought would work for just a very small group and a referee, I put those 9 together, and you very kindly taken one and run with it. But that's fine. I don't think it should be a sacrosanct text that has to be run as written. I would much rather you took inspiration from it and you do exactly what you did with it. I mean, of course, I'd love to have seen it. No. I'm more than happy, because that's exactly what I do with other people's stuff.
Yes.
Even the Traveller Adventure, which I was determined to run fairly straight, as it were, and stick to the book with the problems that it has and so on. Things like my little adventure 2 days on Carston was a very kind of early bit of the Traveller Adventure, where the book, if you look in the Traveller Adventure, I think you go from, is it Zila to Aramis, and there's just one little sentence that says, and nothing much happens on the trip. But you've got a stopover on Carston. And of course, there's no, you can't buy refined fuel, but the March Harrier can refine its fuel. So it's a minimum of 2 days to do that. So I'm thinking, okay, well, let's do that in the pub, when we meet to do the Traveller Adventure. 5 minutes at the beginning of the evening, kind of, then we'll move on. And I thought, it's going to be a really sort of dull planet, and nothing much happens, because that's the formal quote, nothing much happens. So I came up with the dullest attractions I could think of. So you've got like a geology museum, and you've got the respirator collection of Teju Pish, or whatever his name is. I've forgotten his name now. It's just his front room with all these respirators hanging on the wall, kind of thing. The blue plaque of the, the first colonist or whatever, where they were born, or as someone pointed out, not the first colonist, but the first person born on the planet. And I just thought, I'll make them so dull, no one will want to visit them. But my players got all excited about them. So we actually went to the Geology Museum. We went to Teju's respirator collection, and we actually kind of did that. And I thought, all right, okay, we'll spend the evening in the pub doing these really boring kind of I think one of the mining towns just out of the starport was called Boring, because it would be.
Yeah.
And we got to the end of the evening in the pub, and I basically said, and next time we'll be at Aramis, ready to do, whatever. And they said, what about day 2? I mean, like all of them around the table simultaneously said, what about day 2? Because they've got in their heads. And that whole adventure, so I had a month then to go away, think about the little bit of adventure that's in there, but I had to write it such that you could still report that not a lot happens, if you see what I mean. So it was it was a bit of a writing challenge.
Yeah.
But if you have a look at 2 days on Carston, that's where that came out of. So it was kind of always my take on the Traveller Adventure rather than what was written. So, for example, at the end of the chapter on Paisadai, you might be familiar with the idea that they're supposed to get a little group of annelers attracted to them, and they take the annelers with them, and then the annelers, well, I won't spoil the plot. I know it's from 1980 something or other, but maybe there's people for whom this would be spoilers. The annelers have some impact on the plot. But my players took an instant Now, they all claimed that none of them knew the Traveller Adventure, and because only one of them actually knew Traveller before we started, I kind of believe them. But they took instantly against the annelers. But because we had this little creature that someone had taken on board earlier because she loved animals, she got this little pet in the terrarium kind of thing, I just switched that whole bit of plot to these little squeedles, which if you've read Freelance Traveller, you'll have come across the squeedles. And then the work colleague that had the idea about them had a knitting plan for them, or a crochet plan, so you'll find that in Freelance as well. But I think the point really is we made the Traveller. Sorry, Ben, I can see you weeping over there.
No, keep going. It's fascinating.
No. So the point I was trying to make was we very much made the Traveller Adventure our own. And if you've read the write-ups, and I don't blame anyone if they haven't, because I think the 40 episodes I've turned into something like 200,000 words on the Traveller mailing list. In those, trying to write them up, because what I tried to do was write not just the adventure, because what's the point? You can read the book and see what the adventure was. What I tried to write was my experience as a brand new referee, or feeling still like a brand new referee. I'd done a couple of things at TravCon, but this was the first time I'd actually had a gaming group, first time I was running a campaign and not just a kind of one-off games. So those reports endeavor to capture my stresses, my worries, my fears, my thinking, how I tackled stuff. And it might be absolutely rubbish. And, any seasoned referee might say, well, that's not how I would do it. I do this kind of thing. But in my head was the idea that it would be more useful than reporting on the plot, which, fine, but not that interesting, would be how a referee might approach some of the problems of the traveller adventure, because there are some. I don't pretend, I love it. And I've got a good friend in Steve Ellis, who has written a couple of the adventures that we've published as March Harrier, and really great adventures. If you don't like dice rolling, he comes from a LARP background.
Yeah.
So things like Eve of Rebellion, where you get to play the Emperor and Dulinor and Princess Iphigenia, that's right out of his kind of thinking. Forget the dice. Let's just get together. I think we rolled one dice, one dice roll in the entire time.
Good.
We played Eve of Rebellion. I said I wouldn't play it unless I got to play the Emperor. So I was Emperor Strephon for this evening, which is just magical. And the one dice roll was right towards the end when Dulinor attempts to assassinate me. So it was player on player in the last hour. And Dulinor comes in. He gets past my guard somehow, comes in to assassinate me, produces the pistol that he's allowed to carry because he's a noble, rolls the dice, and it's a double one. I survived my assassination. Yes. It was one of those magical moments, the only dice roll of the whole evening. But anyway, Steve, absolutely brilliant at writing those kinds of adventures. So hopefully the next one March Harrier publishes will be the third one of his that puts you in that leadership role. So Eve of Rebellion, the Zodani candidate, if you know that one, and then the next one will be Mirabilis, where it's actually completely diceless, but you're the government of a planet trying to control it. But he takes one look at what I did with Traveller Adventure. He says, I don't think I know anyone who loves the Traveller Adventure as much as you do. And I have to say, 6 years of it, I have rather fallen in love with it, even with its faults. I think it's a marvelous campaign for seeing all the corners of Traveller. It really takes you through. It's a lovely little tour of a corner of the Spinwood Marches, but even more, it's a lovely tour of all the bits of Traveller. So you've got you've got space combat in the trade war chapter. You've got personal combat, not often, which is a relief because our players really aren't into that kind of thing. But you do have.
I know the feeling. Yeah.
Wolf at the door. Yes, you've got trade if you want to do trade. You've got just all the little bits of it come together in a nice unified whole, which I think works really nicely. So if you've got nothing better to do with your life, there's 200,000 words of that kicking around somewhere on the Traveller mailing list, which may or may not be helpful for referees or those interested. But
I'm sure it will be. And certainly in my experience, everybody talks about the fact, quite rightly, that when combat starts, role-playing games grind to a halt because suddenly everything has to be done in turns that last for only a few seconds.
Yeah.
But of course, the other side of that is if you've got a group that is looking for a lot of die rolling, is looking for a lot of combat, a lot of mechanic and decision stuff like that, they tend to be the kind of group who also play very quickly through plot and narrative elements to get on to the next one.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons why it can take us 6 months wandering around a desert to do De La Brew is because as players, our little crew here tends to like interactions and business and espionage and exploration and other things.
I think that's what I love about watching the three of you, is that's very much more my experience with my players, and even the games I've run at TravCon have been much more like that. When I have got into a game, a combat heavy game in TravCon, there's been a bit of me that's thinking, where's the fun in this? Or can't we just get on with the next bit? I know for some people that is the bit, but for me, it's get on with the next bit. So yeah, I think that's one of the things I really love about watching the three of you, is that it kind of that's my real sadness about watching you, is that I want to be playing. It's a bit like football or even porn or whatever. I'd much rather be doing than playing than watching. Rather, do you know what I mean? It's just why would I want to watch it when I could be involved with it? So it's very frustrating because you play so late at night. This is way past my bedtime. With chronic fatigue, I kind of struggle with tiredness and so on. So starting at 11 and going on for 3 hours. So I have to watch you on catch up, which also means I can't even join in the chat and so on, which is another kind of frustration. So
that is a shame.
It's a delight to watch you, but there's also that kind of little frustration.
Well, I mean, it's obviously nice that you could turn up and be live tonight, even if it is a bit late for you. Well,
I'm hoping you're not going on till 2 now.
Well, no, the plan is just to set your mind at ease. In about sort of 10 or 15 minutes, we're going to take a brief break, and when we resume, we're going to come back to the recap of the last half of the season.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're of course more than welcome to stay if you'd like to.
But you're kicking me out as well. Yeah. No, that's
but
fine.
But if you would like to take that opportunity to say goodnight and go to your well-earned rest, we do understand, I promise.
Well, as shamefully, because I've been a bit wrapped up with North Star and writing Spindrift for the last couple of months, to be honest, because, I know I only had 4 hours, but I think it's turned... Oh, I dare and have a look, but I think it's turned into about 55 pages. So it's gotten way out of hand. No, I've lost it. Here it is. Here it is. So you can have a sneak preview, because probably after we publish Mirabilis, you'll be able to see Spindrift. But it's currently at 54 pages. Although, if you want a preview, it's actually, you can find, if you search for Collinson and Spindrift, so spelt like you'd perhaps imagine, you'll find it on Google on the Amber Zone website, because the core 2,000 words, which was their competition limit, was a competition entry for the Zodani Base Amber Zone competition.
Oh, yes.
Which I'm very proud to say came second. So that was very gratifying, gave me some confidence that there was some merit to it, kind of thing. Thank you. So I thought, having written it for the competition, I think it was last year, I thought, what could I take to North Star? And I was thinking of taking a bit of the Traveller Adventure, just because, it's all in my head and easy kind of thing. And I thought, no, it'd be fun to take that. But then as I sort of started to think about it a couple of months ago, I could do this, and it really needs that detail. And it would be helpful if you had that to give the players, and little handouts and maps and that kind of stuff. And a little puzzle, which I've tested on work colleagues. They get inflicted on this, lunch break. We sit round doing my little puzzles to see if it will work and how long it will take. So I've got some idea of kind of how that will go down. So my map librarian, the map librarian in the university, is very patient with kind of saying, why am I looking at this list of, ship movements? Because there's a secret in there, and I want to see if you can spot what the secret is. So yes, it's gotten a little bit out of hand. But if you just want the core of it, you can go and find it online right now and just see the base of it.
Fantastic.
Sorry, you need to stop me when you've had enough.
There's no immediate panic. I was actually just going to ask.
Start me on Traveller, and you may never finish.
I was just going to ask if Luke or Ewan had anything to say, because the two of us have just been rabbiting back and forth all evening so far.
Frankly, it's been a joy to listen to you do it. I feel like I've been watching it. It's great, and I'm also here. I suppose what's the end page limit likely to be? You say you're on 54. Was it currently?
I feel like I am getting close to when I would say it's done. They did laugh at me when I took Into the Unknown. When I took to TravCon, this was like the first adventure I'd ever basically run as a referee. Ashfall was the first I wrote, but I didn't run it till 2 or 3 years later. But Into the Unknown, or Portents and Signs as it was then, was the first one I took to. And I was just absolutely terrified. The week before I went to TravCon, I was just really... just stage fright, I guess, but quite terrified that, there wasn't enough there, or it wasn't Traveller enough, or it wouldn't work, or I don't know. And really, my notes, which became a crutch, essentially, and my kind of confidence about doing it. And there was over 100 pages of stuff. And there's no way you can do that in four hours. You know? And I paid for it a little bit the following year when I'd had a whole year to prepare. I think I may have set the record for TravCon for the number of handouts in a 4-hour game when they had 37 of them. And it was pointed out to me at the end that this is a role-playing game, not a read-playing game. And I did take some thought from that. And Spindrift has got a little bit like that. I think it's close to its final length now. But I have come back from Sheffield, sitting on the train thinking, okay, I just probably need to detail that a little bit more. And maybe that little NPC needs a little bit more motivation. So, yeah, it'll probably get to 60 before I'm done. Yeah.
Yes.
Other than that, the only thing I wanted to ask was TravellerCon next year. I'm looking at the other two as well. If we make it, can we get a game?
I was going to invite him across to Kent to play with us in person at some point. If we all have the same days free at some point. Also,
Kent is not as far as Sheffield, so you may persuade me to that.
We'll even take you out for a curry or something.
Well, that would be really kind. Well, can I put in a bid, though? I had no idea if she'd be interested, but my work colleague, Jane, who was going to drive me to Sheffield, because sadly this poor work colleague who I dragged along to TravCon, basically because I went on about Traveller at lunchtime so many times, thought, just get it out of my system. Let's go and see what the deal is. She came down with pneumonia last Thursday and had to obviously drop out, and is actually, I think, still in QA, the Queen Alexandra Hospital in North Portsmouth, and has been written off work for a fair bit, I think. She's really, she was the driver behind my little group thinking about going to North Star, and sadly couldn't go. So if you are open for something in Kent, then might well be that I could persuade at least one other person to come, if not others from the group. But
that sounds absolutely lovely.
But the other nice thing about going to Sheffield, although it was so far north, was during lockdown, obviously we had to stop meeting in the pub. So out of 40 sessions, we'd done about half of it, maybe 2/3. I can't remember now. I'd have to look it up. In the pub, it started because we had a monthly book group, library book group, as librarians would. We had a little book group, met in the pub once a month, although, as my daughter points out, some of the folk don't even read the book. It's more of a kind of, have a drink in the pub group rather than the book group. But it got to the point where we'd been doing it for 4 or 5 years, and the interest was flagging, and we thought, maybe if we go to alternate months, it will go a little bit better. So what then happened was that the in between months became a traveller session for those who cared, and several librarian colleagues, plus one TravCon grognard who happens to live in the area, have tagged along. So we had, I think, 9 players across the 6 years, but not simultaneously. But some folks started and finished, like my colleague Jane and Tess, who, if you've read the Traveller write-ups, has been there from the beginning and drives me to TravCon mostly. But when we went into lockdown, of course, we thought, can't meet in the pub anymore. Let's try it, as everybody was doing online like this. And we genuinely thought it would be a one-off, and then in 2 months' time, we'd be back in the pub. We genuinely thought that. Stupid us. Anyway, so I thought, it'd be quite cool to have a guest, because we could have anyone in the world now. We're online. We could have a guest slot, one player come for the session. And I advertised on Traveller mailing list for a guest player, so it could have been someone from the States or Australia or anything. Turned out to be someone from Durham, was the first person to express an interest. So Jim joined us for that session and then stayed with us, because we never basically went back to the pub. We've played online ever since, kind of sadly in some ways, because what I loved about North Star was real people round a real table again. That was just magic. But anyway, Jim joined us, stayed with us. And we've kind of never looked back from that. But I persuaded him to come down to Sheffield for the day. He came on the Sunday, and I actually got to meet him in real life. So that was really kind of special. Whether he'd want to come to Kent, don't know.
well, maybe not. But I mean, I haven't got the slightest idea how we would do this, but we may even be able to come up with some hybrid solution. I don't know exactly how that would work, but it might be possible to have some people in one room and some people dialing in. I'll give it some thought. You never know. We may be able to work it out.
Okay, I better start talking to my wife very nicely.
Well, we have a Travelodge now, and we've got lots of curry houses and pubs. And you and I were discussing it the other night about there's some venues around. You could hire a small hall for a couple of days, just a Saturday and Sunday. Everyone goes home on a Sunday evening or something. It's doable.
TravCon 2 then, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, Andy, I heard Andy was actually thinking. We've met for the last decade before COVID, in Sawtree, sort of halfway between Huntingdon and Peterborough.
Okay.
To be honest, I know nothing about the place. I'd get to TravCon, sit in the motel for 2.5, 3 days, come away again, never see Cambridge at all, to my shame. But the rumour has it he was kind of looking for it, because I think we fill the place now with 35, 40 of us. We take over this little motel, so it's kind of can't grow. So rumour has it that he was actually looking for a new venue. So if you like, Ben, or are happy with that, I could perhaps give him contact details.
Please
Whether
do.
the direction he wants to go, I don't know, because obviously that makes it harder for folk up north. But
we are quite knobbly on the end, and people have got to do the M25.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those toss-up things, isn't it? You've got to pick a location that people can get to, but it's also got to be somewhere that's affordable and has the facilities you need.
Absolutely, yes.
We're not very far away from Canterbury, for example, and I suspect Canterbury could probably handle anything you could likely need, but it might be a bit out of the way for people.
Yeah. Well, I could at least put you in touch. So I have no idea what he's thinking. I haven't spoken to him in a wee bit, which is to my shame, really. Because I have to say, that's perhaps the other thing I've taken great inspiration, encouragement from, is sitting round tables with Andy refereeing. I mean, Graham Spearing, who I met again at Sheffield, who had met TravCon, I've sat in his games and great admiration for as well. So it was a great joy to see him last week, and a great terror to have him come and play in Spindrift. But sitting watching Andy play, he's become known for running these chirpa games. So these rather stupid chirpa trash collectors, rubbish collectors. His wife and his former wife, wrote these wonderful scenarios that are just a riot from beginning to end, and people buy into the talking in the high voices and chirping throughout. In fact, Jane runs a mile from those games because she just can't bear the whole thing. But I'm just in awe of how fun they are, and also he seems to be able to run that kind of thing with a page and a half of notes kind of thing. I'm just thinking, how do you do that? If only I could learn the secret.
Well, everybody's style is different, I think it's fair to say.
Instead of this. I mean, this is handy when it comes to publishing it later, but it's...
Yes. I tend to write down enormous quantities of stuff and then use very little of it, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I had all these lovely things that the players went nowhere near. I mean, there was all this stuff. On the other hand, I should thank you for... One of the ideas I came up with, I may have told you or said on Twitter, I had this idea for, because it's an out-of-the-way place and there's very little population, I thought, there should be a notice board in the market. And, of course, Tech Level 9, it will be electronic. And then I thought, it might be more fun if the electronic notice board is broken and everybody stuck Post-its on the top of it. I thought, okay, well, I'll build the electronic notice board and then put Post-its on it. So that's what this is, which you may not be able to see very well. But on Twitter, you, I think it was Luke possibly, very kindly sent 2 of these little adverts, and one for a Tech Level 12 laptop that I think came from Cara, and one for just a stateroom on the Baltic Star. And they were there in the players. I left them on there as a kind of opportunity to sell yourselves to players, and I think it was the second group picked up on the kind of the connection there and laughed at the thing. So that kind of was nice. So thank you very much for contributing 2 of those, because you know how it is when you think, I'll have this bright idea and I'll put all these little wanted ads and sale notices and whatnot, and then you kind of do 6 of them and you think, what am I going to do now?
They all start to look the same and they sound the same because they're all new.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there was lots on there. Every single one of those post-its or pretend post-its had a little paragraph behind it and could have led to something else. Well, maybe one or two of them would have been very brief, but of course we only had time for two. But the one you might particularly like, again, the lady playing Vood's on in the first game, one of them is it's the what was it? I've forgotten what it's called. Cuts. It's a barbers that specialise in Varga fur.
Yes,
they are
we need to
floofers.
go.
You'll be pleased to hear that the German lady daughter playing Vood's on in that episode actually went to Cuts, and what was nice for that, from my point of view, is I also had a D66 rumour table for them to encounter rumours in the market or in the street or whatever. But the hairdressers was where you could get the most rumours. So they kind of came out ahead in having stuff to be able to follow up, because I thought, the barbers would probably be the best place to park, three or four rumours for them to pick up. I thought might work quite nicely. So, yes, Vood's on came out floofy from that as well.
So much floof.
So much floof, yeah.
if anyone loves all the floof, if you go to our shop, our online shop, you can get a Thirsty Floof Bitch mug. No, floof. It's a Floof Inspector, an official Varga Floof Inspector mug or T-shirt. I didn't go for the Thirsty Floof Bitches in the end. I went for the Floof Inspector instead.
It's good that it's official. You wouldn't want this to be like an unofficial inspectorate.
No,
yes.
Just people wandering around touching Varga.
One of the other adverts was for a competition for a nature poem, and two players actually sat and wrote a poem while we were there. So I think one of them, because of the way he'd done it, wouldn't work, but the other one, he's very kindly given me permission to. So yeah, my 54 pages will have another half page of his little poem that he wrote. So
nice.
if you've if you've had a look at Second Science Society, you may know that Graham Spearing was one of the players in one of the times I ran that game. And part of that is that the players as nobles, as these kind of dilettante nobles who are the second sons and daughters and offspring of counts, essentially, don't have anything better to do. So every couple of years they get together to have these Second Science Society meetings and around a dinner table, of course. And one of the things they do at the dinner table is to tell stories. And I thought it might be quite fun to have the players actually tell a little story after we'd done the dinner before we kind of moved on to other events.
Okay.
And I had 6 players once, 6 players in t'other one, and 11 of them played ball with that. The other felt that they preferred to roll dice and see how their story went by dice. But that's fine too. I was ready for that. So we had 11 of these stories, which probably took maybe more than half an hour in each game. But was one of the most magical parts of the game, as the players told these little stories in character. And some just told little sort of ditties, some sort of recycled a Star Wars plot in Traveller kind of terms. But Graham Spearing sat and wrote, in the kind of little time that we had, this magical story about sort of an Aslan who had problems and so on. And it just kind of made you cry, really. It was that moving. And he very kindly gave me permission to put it in Second Science Society. So I would say out of that whole adventure, it's worth buying, not for the adventure, but for that story from Graham.
Just for that one story, yeah.
It's just one little story in there that just, even now when I reread it, it's still very moving and so on. So I've learned from some of the best at TravCon in kind of giving the players that opportunity to do their own thing, kind of thing. Dom Mooney, absolutely brilliant at that, and kind of taught me very early on. He said, you go up to this office suite on the 30th floor of this high rise, what do you see? Well, as a player, I'm thinking, well, why aren't you telling me? You're the referee. And I thought, no, how genius. Get the player to tell you what you can see. And it really involved me in that bit of the story. But it also taught me as a referee, give the players a chance to build the universe around you and to do stuff and to create stuff and be creative. And it's not just all on the referee. And for me, that's been a kind of really nice learning point, that I love putting stuff together, but So do the players. It's Traveller. It's creative. It's just that kind of magic of bringing that together. And that for me has been a real delight of the game, a delight of TravCon and North Star last week. And I think, see it in yourselves playing as well, which I really enjoy. When, Ben's sitting there and he hasn't said anything for half an hour because two players with 4 characters have just gone off onto something I don't think was written down anywhere.
No. No.
Yeah, I do think Ben gets that look sometimes.
The 1,000-yard stare, you mean?
Yeah. That's the one.
Yes. Well, I think it's about time we took our little break. So, thank you so much for joining us, Timothy.
Well, no, thank you for having me and putting up with me and being patient with my enthusiasm for obscure bits of
Your
travel.
enthusiasm is infectious, sir. So, if you would like to stick around for the rest of it, please do. If not, then that's fine too. But just in case, I just want to say thank you so much for letting us use and abuse your story. Yeah. There are about 7 or 8 more of them in this book, and I'm probably planning to use and abuse another one very soon as well.
Oh, I'm going to have to keep watching, aren't I?
Well, yeah. It's almost as if that was the plan.
That's how we're going to keep watching.
It must be a hard way to get viewers, though.
Oh, yeah. one viewer per writer. Yes, it's...
Yeah.
And they have to send in 10,000 words.
Well, I should say thank you for buying the thing. I mean, that definitely, anybody that goes into writing Traveller Adventures, I think, to sell anywhere, even if you do it through the Cepheus route, where you get a few more pennies than you might from the TAS license, which... but I love having the Third Imperium to play in. So for me, it's kind of worth the extra pennies that Mongoose take from that. But... don't retire tomorrow would be my advice. Keep your day job.
No,
but, every penny, I should thank you because that helps me, add to the shelves behind me kind of thing in small ways at least. So I'm deeply appreciative and constantly surprised by anyone buying them at all. So thank you for that. Well, and good luck with the next few, the next sessions of the Baltic Star. It has been a great treat to come across you because I've long said that I really struggle with watching. There's a proper name for them, isn't there? I can't think what it's called.
Live play, isn't it? Live play.
Live recordings of live play, and I think I want to be playing. I don't want to be watching it. But if I was going to watch one, clearly yours is the one to watch.
Be kind.
A glowing endorsement. Get it written down, Ewan.
Now that we've been so sweet to each other that we've given all of our viewers diabetes. Thank you, Timothy. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope you will do so again at some point, and maybe we can indeed arrange to sit around a table and play, or play over the internet, or whatever. We will do something, I hope.
Brilliant. Good.
That would be lovely.
And lovely to see you in real rather than recorded.
To actually be responsive and live.
Yes. Yes. I sit there watching, thinking, I want to say this, and then I realise you can't hear me. And then I read something in the chat, and I actually put my fingers on the keyboard to reply, thinking, I can't.
Well, thank you so much, and please let's do this again sometime.
Okay.
Now I'm just about to
all
take
the best. Have a good night.
Cheers.
Take care, man.
I'm just about to take us into a sort of 5 or so minute break, and we will be back with the mid-season catch-up for Season 2. So stay with us, everyone. We will be back in just a few minutes.